guys, it's Eddie and today I am back with another movie review for you all. Now, first of all, I have to apologise because I haven't been watching a lot of movies lately. It's mainly been, surprisingly for me, TV series. I'm currently watching the third series of Better Call Saul, which is amazing and I'm in love with it, and I love Jimmy McGill and he's a precious bean. But I did manage to scrape together a few reviews of films that I have recently watched and thought I would share with you guys, just to give you my thoughts on films that I particularly enjoyed and would like to have shared with you and inspired you to watch them maybe as well if you cared to. So today's movie that I'll be reviewing is George Lucas's 1973 teen comedy film American Graffiti, starring Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard, Paul Le Mat, Candy Clark, Cindy Williams, and an adorable little cameo from Harrison Ford. Now, this film follows a group of teenagers who are in the process of leaving high school and going off to college, and it's set in the 1960s, 1962 I believe. And the sort of central character of the film is Kurt Henderson, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and he is really stuck in a rut of not knowing whether to stay in his hometown or to go off to college and, you know, take the next step forward into his life. We've also got storylines running alongside Kurt's, which are Ron Howard's, which involves him and his girlfriend. She's begging him to stay. She wants him to stay with her until she's finished high school because she's a year behind him. And he's, you know, adamant that he's going, and there's that kind of indecisiveness along with this film. And there's other little storylines running alongside those two. I loved the interchanging individual stories. I thought it was a really cool way to pace the film. I do think, however, though, that some stories fared better than others because while I enjoyed some of them, others, when the scene switched to characters that I perhaps weren't as interested in, or the storyline really wasn't entertaining me as much as others, I kind of felt a little bit bored and I wanted to return to the other ones. For example, Kurt's story, although I adore Richard Dreyfuss, as I've mentioned before in a video of some sort, I thought Kurt's story was a little bit lackluster, following this mystery girl that drove past him in a car and she mouthed "I love you" or something, and he's dead set on trying to find her. I thought that the highlight of his story was when he got involved with the T-Bird like Pharaohs gang, who like inaugurated him into their group by getting him to play a prank on a police car. I thought that was the highlight of his story, but the bulk of his story, trying to find this girl whom he pinned his whole future on, was kind of boring, and I became a little bit disinterested compared to some of the other characters, like Paul Le Mat's story, you know, ferrying this young girl around and, you know, her getting on his nerves, and that provided a lot of comedy. So I enjoyed that a lot more than Kurt's story, which was a shame because, as I said, Richard Dreyfuss is a great actor and he was kind of at the forefront of the film, and I thought it was a little bit of a bad move perhaps, because his story just, to me, wasn't as entertaining as some of the side stories that were going on at the same time. I think that, as I said, his moments with the Pharaoh gang that were kind of these sort of youths that were, you know, part of a cool gang, and he kind of got accidentally mixed up with them by sitting on their car. I thought that was a great comedy opportunity fulfilled, but I think that overall the message of his character and of Ron Howard's character actually not knowing which path to take next was interesting, and it's something that most of us go through in our teenage years. And I thought that through those characters in the film, it was captured really well. It was just that in the meantime, you kind of had to put up with a few lackluster storylines, which, as I said, some fared better than others overall. Now, although I thought that for a rather young cast, the acting was great and it was full of that teen vigour and wildness and angst, which is very, very relatable, and something that later movies really capitalised on, like movies in the 1980s. I didn't exactly become as attached to the characters as I thought I would when the film set out. By the end, I was kind of like, oh, I liked some of them, but I wasn't really drawn to any of them. And perhaps that was because there were quite a few of them, and because of that constantly interchanging storyline plot where the scenes flitted back and forth between each other, maybe I lost that opportunity for connection with a lot of the characters that I really like to enjoy when I'm watching a film. I like to feel attached to the characters, and I just felt like that connection didn't happen as I wanted it to. Nevertheless, those changing stories, those changing scenes, saved me from becoming bored. So maybe one was sacrificed for the other. In the case of, they sacrificed you forming bonds with these characters for, creating a less boring film, because you got to see characters changing in between scenes, and there was like a lot more of them than if it was just one character, and then a lot of the other characters were background characters, if you understand me. So I think maybe they sacrificed that attachment that you usually make, or I usually make, in films with characters, for making it a more entertaining and sort of rambunctious plot with all of the characters following their individual storylines. That was just a small point of negativity that I had regarding this film. I mean, I don't always get attached to characters in films, but I just felt like I was kind of like, I wasn't sure whether I liked any of them, and I expected to because it was a teen comedy. But that doesn't necessarily make it a bad film. It was just a point that I picked up on. I did like the end. Kurt, spoiler, sorry, Kurt leaving to make his own journey, and the title card coming up telling us what happened to each of the characters that we encountered in the film, because obviously they were a friendship group, but obviously we all saw them develop individually. We see that parodied a lot now with, the freeze frame coming up and it telling us what happened and what the characters went on to do. But I thought that was a nice touch, and even though, as I said, I didn't feel totally attached to these characters, I was still like, oh, that's cool, so-and-so went off and did that, or, I was like, oh, fine. I enjoyed that as an aspect. And something that I did particularly enjoy was the soundtrack, because it was that 1960s really cool soundtrack, and they had the radio playing in the cars throughout the film, and I thought that it just created a really cool feel, and it took us right back to that authenticity of the 1960s high school youth, with tracks like Green Onions playing, and I just thought it was very groovy, and I thought it fit the film perfectly. Obviously following a group of teenagers, I just thought that the soundtrack was very well implemented within the film, and it suited it very, very well. I thought that it was a really enjoyable film. I thought it was a great film. It wasn't although I had my negative points about them, this didn't truly spoil the film as a whole. It didn't have much of a plot, but it certainly didn't make you feel disengaged, although there was a lot of driving around in cars and a lot of dialogue. I thought the dialogue was really well written, it was funny, and I thought that the actors delivered it perfectly well. I definitely wasn't disengaged with it, and I think that switching of the perspectives of the characters from scene to scene really allowed that, because, as I said, I think that viewpoint that changed throughout the film really helped you to feel less bored. I feel like if it had just been Kurt's story, I would have been thoroughly bored because his was less interesting than some of the others. But as I said, you know, great acting, great soundtrack. It had all the makings of a good film. I just maybe didn't find myself as tied to the characters as I have done with other high school comedies like Grease and films that were later made in the 1980s. But George Lucas really made a great film with American Graffiti, and it's kind of a classic now, and I can see why. It's definitely a fun film, and I enjoyed it overall. I think if I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 stars. For me, it wasn't perfect. There were a couple of issues, as I said, a thin plot and some missed opportunities with some of the characters, but it was well made, well directed, and yeah, I enjoyed it overall. Maybe you guys will disagree with me, maybe it's your favourite film, and for that I'm sorry. Hey, I would definitely go back and watch it again. I've got no issues with it. It just wasn't perfect. That's as simple as, and it's got, you know, some great actors in it. It was enjoyable seeing Harrison Ford spring up in his crazy car and his cowboy hat. That was definitely fun. And as I said, Richard Dreyfuss as Kurt was adorable, and yeah, I wish he had gotten a little bit of a better storyline. So yeah, that's my take on American Graffiti. I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Remember, you can always request movies for me to review by commenting below or messaging me on my Tumblr. Link is always in the description. But that's it for now. Hope you guys have enjoyed this review, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!